So let's unpack each one in detail. Step 1, identify your triggers. Your thoughts and reactions follow an unseen script, shaped by past experiences, beliefs, and habits. Some patterns are so ingrained, they feel like second nature, but they can be limiting you if left unexamined. So self-awareness is key to pick those up, those ingrained beliefs. Self-awareness is key. Therefore, question why you think and act the way you do in situations. Are your reactions truly valid, or are they shaped perhaps by past wounds or fears? Because understanding your story gives you the power to reshape your future. As a reflection, what situations consistently trigger negative emotions or thoughts for you? Are they connected to past experiences or unmet needs? And then as action, complete the life map activity that is at the end of your session notes to explore your highs and lows of your life. Then identify emotional responses tied to those past events. And then recognize the patterns such as feelings of abandonment or fear that influences your beliefs and your actions right now. Remember, awareness is the first step to transformation. Our second step is to recognize and assess your emotions. Pause before reacting. When triggered, it's easy to react without understanding what's happening inside. Taking a moment to identify your emotions gives you the control over your response. Why does this matter? Emotions influence reactions more than we realize. Naming our emotions helps uncover what is actually beneath the surface. And awareness is the first step toward change. We can only manage that which we are aware of, right? So here are some actions to gain emotional awareness. Firstly, pause and identify. Use the feelings wheel to name your emotions. Ask, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Then secondly, explore the life map. Reflect on past events and how they shaped your emotional responses. For example, losing a close friend at 14 may still impact you today. And then thirdly, use the photo technique at the end of the document. Look at childhood photos to unlock hidden emotions and memories that influence your current reactions. Remember, understanding your emotions lays the foundation for transforming your responses. Step 3, identify distorted thoughts. Let's look at an analogy, the cracked glass. It helps us to understand the origins of our triggers. Unhealed wounds shape reactions. Imagine a glass with a small crack, like in the picture. At first, it holds liquid, but over time, pressure deepens the crack until it shatters. Not from the present moment, but from an old flaw left unaddressed as the crack became bigger and bigger. Our emotional triggers work the same way. Many of our strongest reactions stem from earlier wounds. And when new experiences touch these wounds, they trigger intense emotions. We aren't just reacting to the present, but to layers of past pain. Healing starts with awareness. By identifying these wounds, we can mend them and build emotional resilience. So we want to embrace healing, the art of kintsugi. Kintsugi is turning brokenness into beauty. In Japanese art, when pottery breaks, gold fills the cracks. They make gold inlays in the cracks. Why gold? Because they didn't have glue centuries ago. So they fill the cracks with gold and mend it again, making it more beautifully than it was before. Instead of hiding the imperfections, they are honored as part of the piece's journey. The same applies to emotional healing. Our past wounds don't define us. They can become emblems of strength that gives us character, that gives us experience, that gives us wisdom. Makes us interesting. By addressing emotional cracks, we grow in maturity and resilience. Healing doesn't erase our past, but it transforms it into wisdom. So as a reflection, what past wounds might be influencing your current reactions still? How can you begin to honor them as part of your journey and heal? So let's look at another analogy, the iceberg model for self-awareness. We want to look at what you see versus what lies beneath. The iceberg model is a useful metaphor for understanding how we process emotions and beliefs. Imagine an iceberg floating in the ocean. Above the surface, we only see a small part. That is the visible behaviors, emotions, and thoughts we are consciously aware of and actively in control. However, beneath the surface, much more remains hidden, influencing our actions and decisions in ways we might not immediately recognize. So there are 3 layers to the iceberg. The first one is the tip of the iceberg. That is our conscious awareness. The part of ourselves that is visible and expressed in our daily behaviors, reactions, and thoughts. This is what we can see and control, but it's only a fraction of the full picture. Secondly, just below the surface is the subconscious awareness. This layer holds stored emotions, past experience, and learned patterns. This is our emotional response. It often influences our immediate reactions, even if we don't fully understand why we feel a certain way. For instance, it's just underneath our consciousness. It's the subconscious. So we can sometimes easily access the most prominent emotion. For instance, I'm angry that somebody drove in front of me. Yet to understand where that emotion comes from, what is the raw nerve it's touching deeper down, that is lower down in the mountain, the Iceberg Mountain. So now, third step, going lower, deep below the surface, the deepest part is the biggest part of the iceberg. This is the unconscious beliefs and our core perceptions. This is where our thought patterns, core beliefs, and deep-seated narratives reside. These beliefs shape how we interpret life, and many of them have been formed in early childhood. Some of these beliefs are healthy and rational, while others may be outdated, distorted, or rooted in past wounds. Also, notice the connection at the deepest parts of the iceberg between our belief structures and our unmet needs. Unmet needs from childhood and early experiences such as not being validated, affirmed, or made to feel secure due to a caregiver's lack of awareness or their own unresolved wounds. They shape core beliefs like, I am unworthy, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, I'm insignificant. And from there, a negative cycle begins. To cope with these unmet needs and painful beliefs, we develop coping mechanisms such as people-pleasing, overachieving, perfectionism, avoidance, or numbing. Because these patterns exist deep in our unconscious, they operate as automatic habits. And whenever we perceive even the slightest threat of having our needs go unmet again, the fear of reliving those painful beliefs of being unworthy, insignificant, or a failure trigger these coping responses. To break this cycle, we must become aware of these automatic patterns and trace them back to their origin wounds. Only then we can heal, stop reacting from our coping mechanisms, and start responding from our reframe, true identity, who we truly are, rather than who our past and present experiences tell us we are. As a personal example, in my own life, feeling dismissed or forgotten in childhood led to a belief that I wasn't worthy or good enough. To cope, I began driven to work harder, achieve more, and show I was valuable. But over time, these learned behaviors, rather than being a way to prove my worth, became skills I could consciously use to face challenges with resilience after I've healed. So let's look at identifying challenging limiting beliefs. Our automatic behaviors are often protective mechanisms we develop to cope with early experiences. For example, if someone felt unworthy as a child, like me, they may overcompensate by becoming an overachiever, constantly striving for external validation. While these behaviors may have once been survival strategies, they can turn into automatic patterns that no longer serves us. Being on autopilot in those coping mechanisms, being led by whatever triggers those in a given situation. The challenge is to recognize these patterns and separate them from the need to prove our worth. So here are some steps for self-reflection. First up, use tools like the feelings wheel to identify emotions and uncover hidden triggers. Use the life map to explore life events that shape your core beliefs and recognize how they influence your current responses. And ask yourself, what about this situation is making me feel this way? Is this reaction tied only to the present? Or is it linked to something deeper from my past? As a famous quote goes, we are all unreliable narrators of our lives. There's always another possible version. The way in which we narrate our lives shapes what they become. If we change our stories, we change our lives. We often feel trapped in our stories, but we do have the freedom to choose to change them. Freedom comes with a responsibility to own my part of the story and my need for change. Change always involves a loss of the predictable, a loss of what was known. But once we edit our story, we need to let go of one version and start telling a new one. This is scary at first, but do become easier over time. So with some reflection questions, what core beliefs are driving your behaviors? Are these beliefs empowering you, or are they holding you back? How can you begin rewriting your internal narrative to align with who you truly are? By becoming aware of our unconscious beliefs, we gain the power to reshape them, moving from reactive patterns to intentional growth and healing. Understanding emotional responses and the brain's role. So how emotional responses are formed. Our emotional reactions don't happen in isolation. They are deeply influenced by our past experiences and the belief structures we've built over time. Like looking at the Iceberg Model with the beliefs, the thinking pattern, the emotions, and the behavior. When we encounter a triggering event, it activates pre-existing memories in the brain stored in our subconscious. These memories engage the hypothalamus and the amygdala, releasing emotions tied to past events, helping us to run away or fight or flee or freeze in threatening experiences. But positive memories bring joy, love, and connection, whereas negative memories resurfaces as fear, anger, or resentment with our threat responses, fight, flee, and freeze. So as a personal example, I once felt dismissed in social settings, leading me to form an unconscious belief that I wasn't valued. But later in life, when I found myself in situations where I felt ignored, I experienced intense frustration, not because of the present moment alone, but because my brain was responding to a past emotional wound that had never been fully processed. So knowing the brain treats thoughts as reality. The emotional brain does not distinguish between real events and perceived events, what we think is happening. It responds to thoughts as if they are happening in real time. When we replay negative experiences or dwell on painful memories, our brain reactivates these emotions tied to those events, reinforcing the belief that we are still in danger. This is why ruminating on negative thoughts intensifies emotional and physical reactions, even when the situation no longer possesses a real threat. For example, imagine walking in the wild and suddenly spotting a snake. Your brain instantly triggers fear, prompting a fight or flight response. But then upon closer inspection, you realize it's just a stick. And the moment your perception changes, your emotional reaction shifts, right? In the same way, many of our emotional responses today are shaped by past experiences and threats and trauma that distorted our perception of a certain situation or certain experiences. Just as we can reframe what we see, we can reframe what we believe about ourselves and heal old emotional triggers. So reframing emotional responses from healing. In order to change how we respond to emotional triggers, we must first become aware of the past wounds that shaped them. These emotional cracks influence our thoughts, feelings, and actions until we recognize them and begin the work of reshaping our beliefs. Healing starts with understanding that our past does not have to dictate our future. When we acknowledge these wounds, challenge the old narratives that's attached to it, and actively choose new ways of thinking and behaving, we free ourselves from destructive emotional and behavioral cycles and step into growth, resilience, and emotional freedom. So remember, awareness is the first step to transformation. And healing happens when we choose to reframe our perceptions and break free from the patterns of past. So we want to reframe unworthiness, right? And we can use that transformation through the Iceberg Model. The Iceberg Model is a powerful tool to look at for transforming irrational beliefs and developing healthier emotional and behavioral responses. This transformation requires commitment, however, conscious effort, and consistent practice, just like you are doing. So as an example, someone who believes they are unworthy of success due to past failures may experience anxiety and self-doubt when facing new challenges. By applying the Iceberg Model or helping them to understand what's happening for them, they can acknowledge surface-level emotions like anxiety and fear. They can explore deeper beliefs driving these emotions, and they can recognize that their belief in unworthiness stems from past hurts, past realities, which is not definitions of or truth about you. And then they can work to address and reframe this belief. Through consistent practice, they challenge the idea that their worth is tied to past mistakes. They begin to see that failure does not define them and that they deserve success. In critical moments, they engage their rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, and make logical decisions instead of reacting emotionally. For example, when they feel unworthy in a challenging work situation, they can remind themselves, this situation is difficult, with empathy. But my past doesn't define me. I will face this now with confidence. By continuing to apply the Iceberg model, they gain self-awareness and shift their mindset toward healthier, empowering beliefs, leading to lasting transformation.